We're the West ladies.
Welcome to Homestead Blessings.
When I was a young girl, I was inspired by my mother's beautiful sewing. Soon, I learned to sew on my grandmother's treadle machine.
Now we're happy to share with you practical sewing skills that are still as useful today as they were generations ago.
Let's get started sewing. As we're getting started, we want to remind you to reference the definitions and tips on the bonus features section of this DVD and to keep your sewing machine manual handy.
We'll be using patterns and tackling some more involved projects in a few minutes, but we're going to get started with a very simple and fun project that's a good way for us to get our feet wet.
We're going to have Mom and Jasmine kick us off with a task any young lady will enjoy. They're going to show us some simple sewing steps as they make a pillow, pillowcase, and blanket for a baby doll.
I would like to just encourage you with a pillowcase first because they're simple and they're small and it makes a nice gift.
Right, we have our fabric. We like to wash, dry, and iron our fabric. That way there's no chemical sizing on it, and also that way it's pre-shrunk so that after you make your project, if you didn't wash your fabric first, you go to wash it and it's smaller than it was, so wash your fabric. Another thing that I'm going to share with you is most new fabrics, it has a salvaged edge. This is the edge that the loom finished off. And usually it's smooth. This one is frayed because it's flannel. But you'll be able to find it's the finished edge on the ends of the fabric. Most of the time when you sew, you want the salvaged edge running up and down or vertical. All right, let's cut out a pillow. We're going to start with a pillow. So we're going to lay our fabric out. Most patterns, you buy at the store like tissue paper or they're paper. And they slide around, so you have to pin them or baste them to your material so you can cut out whatever it is you're wanting to sew. Well, if you use fabric for your pattern, it sticks because of course you're going to be using fabric for your garment or item that you're cutting, and it sticks right to it. This is a little doll pillow, so it's 7 inches wide and 9 inches long. That's our pattern. So your finished pillow is going to be a little bit smaller. I like to usually always fold my fabric over so that it's doubled, and that way you don't have to cut twice. Cutting out is a very, very crucial step in your sewing. When I first started sewing, I was so eager to get to the machine that I would just run through this and cut out really fast, and I'd have a sloppy item. And once I sat down to the machine, it was like, oh no, it's not working right. So this is a crucial step you really want to spend some time on.
I love those scissors, aren't they great?
They are excellent. It is so worth investing in a good pair of shears, as Mom was saying. But what's nice about sewing squares and rectangles is they're straight, so it's not as hard to cut or sew. All right, we'll just cut one more side here. Now we have our 2 pieces. Now the nice thing is they're already right sides together because you want your seam on the insides.
We're going to be sewing a plain straight seam, and that is what you're going to be using almost all the time you sew. You're going to be doing a lot of straight seams. And so once you get this down, you can sew a lot of things: dresses, skirts, jackets, blankets, everything. I'm going to probably put a few pins. Because it's flannel, it sticks together so nice. I'm only going to use a couple of pins, maybe 2. This just holds together so well. I'm going to start, because I don't like to start at a corner, I'm going to start in a little bit on my seam here, right here.
So that we start here, and we're going to go all the way around, and then we'll end here. We need to leave an opening. This is a pillow, so we're going to want to stuff it, so we have to leave an opening to be able to turn it right side out.
So we're going to go over to the machine. I'm going to give the little foot pedal down below a little bit of power.
Do a back stitch.
I can do a back stitch. It makes it really nice. Just push that little button, and here we go. And I'm going to guide very carefully, remembering, and I know moms, you'll be encouraging your children for sure not to put their fingers anywhere near the front of your needle ever. Just always try to have them way out here on the sides. Now when I get to this corner, I'm going to stop the needle and go just a little longer. Stop the needle right in the middle where I want to start my other seam, I'm going to pull my presser foot up, and I'm going to turn to the right, and that gives me my angle there, my corner, and I'm going to put the presser foot back down. So here I go again. And slow it first. Once again, this is just a straight stitch, and we want to be very careful with our fingers. And when I get to the corner there, and put my presser foot down again, there we go. And I'm going to stop here and leave a little place for my stuffing for my pillow. I think that might be enough. You know, you want like 3 or 4 inches so you can get your stuffing in there real good. Put my needle down. There we go. So, you know, when young ones do nice projects that don't take too long, simple projects that don't take too long, and they finish it, they get a sense of accomplishment. And that encourages them to sew more. It's kind of neat. Okay. And I'm going to stop there. Down. We use this red threads for the sake that y'all can see it and it can show up real good.
Right, usually you would use a white thread for a white fabric or something that matches so that the seams don't show up.
I guess I can take out the pins now and want to put them right up into the pin cushion, which is so nice because they'll be right there when I need them. And we want to trim these little corners and you don't want to, of course, hit the thread. You want to just trim that away, and it makes a nicer pillow.
The sides come out a little bit better when you trim. You don't have such bulk right there. So that's why we're trimming
makes a better corner.
Trimming the corners.
Now we're going to turn it inside out. And you can make pillows any sizes. You can make pillows for your sofa. You can make pillows, you know, bed pillows, and it's a nice gift. I'm going to go ahead and put all my stuffing in here. And
yeah, we just use polyester stuffing. You can get cotton, wool. Just find something nice and soft to stuff it with. While Mom's stuffing her pillow, I'm going to show you how to do a simple, this is called a whip stitch, to sew this closed. So we have our sewing needle, and I like to double my thread. I always double my thread, whatever project I'm doing. So it's real easy. You just thread it and knot it at the end and go ahead and clip the little threads there. And then you want to start on your pillow a little bit on the seam that she did on the machine, just so it's nice and tight there. You can just tuck those little threads in, and we're just going to go in with our needle. We want to do small, tight stitches so that the stuffing doesn't come out. And we also want to do them small so, you know, it doesn't show as much. This is so cute. Yeah, these are fun. So we're just going to, we went in from the back to the other side, and now we're just going to bring it around and go in again from the back. Just a little ways over from our knot. And then we'll go in. This is just called a whip stitch. I think we'll just finish this one up, and Hannah's going to come and help us make a pillowcase for our pillow.
We want it a little bit bigger than the pillow.
That's right, we would want it
right.
bigger. So we got,
so
yeah, we got a 15.5 by 14 inches. And we're making it a different measurement because we want the pillow to fit in right. But what we're going to do first is iron down where we're going to hem it. And what you want to do, when you go to hem it, you want to do a small hem first, or a small fold like that. And then you're going to make a bigger fold, and that's going to be your hem. But before we go to sew it down, we're going to iron it, so we'll keep everything nice and straight. There we go. You want to always be very careful when you're using an iron because they are very hot. And then we're going to fold it once more. I'm going to try getting this a little bigger. How's that, Mom?
Oh, that's great. That's great.
There we go. Now, like I said, we're going to have this ironed down, so when we go to sew, because we're going to sew the seam first before we sew down the hem. But that will help us, when we go to sew the hem, it'll help us stay straight. And what we're going to do with this pillowcase, it's so simple. We're just going to sew a straight line down here, and then we're going to turn and sew a straight line here. We don't have to sew here because it was cut on the fold, which is always very nice because it saves time. You don't have to do any extra sewing. So we've ironed this down, but what we're going to do is we're going to open it up when we sew, makes it easier to sew the tube. But the line will be there for us where I ironed it when I go to sew it down. And I can just fold it. Then we're just going to turn the corner here, sew this down. All right, now I'm going to take it off. Let me lift my needle up. Now we're ready to fold down this hem that we had started. Where it was, oh, that's so much easier than having nothing to go by. Put it on the fold.
What's nice about our machine, and I think several other machines, is you can remove this little arm here.
And then we just put it like this, right?
Right. But I usually like to go ahead and start my hem stitch near the seams.
I'm going to sew forward a little bit, and then I'm going to do my back stitch, and that's going to keep you from having to tie your strings. And that's my back stitch. And here we go, we're ready to start the seam now. And I'm back to where I started. So we're going to get this up right here. Just a couple of stitches there. Then we're going to hit the back stitch and a couple of more stitches. Let me straighten it out. There we go. And I think that's it. All right. Now I'm going to cut the strings.
So we made the pillow and we have the pillowcase. Thank you so much, Hannah.
You're welcome. That was fast and easy, and it's fun to do too.
And it's a nice little...
There you go.
Oh, isn't that sweet?
Great.
So we have the pillow, the pillowcase. Let's make a blanket. We're gonna need batting for this. We used stuffing for this, for the pillow, and now we're gonna use batting for the quilt. Okay, so we're gonna need 2 pieces of fabric and 1 piece of your batting. And we, again, like to use flannel. So you want to have 2 pieces of fabric cut 28 long and 21.5 wide to make a blanket the size that we're going to make it.
But really, they can make it any size they like, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the perfect size for like an 18-inch doll. Your batting, you want 1 inch smaller on all sides. So you want it a little bit smaller. Now I'm going to show you how we lay this out so we'll be ready to sew. So we're going to lay
nice.
your printed fabric down, print side down first. And then you're going to put your batting on top of it. Okay, now we want to pin it so it stays in place. Make sure this is laid out nice. We're going to take our pin, and instead of doing it on the inside, this is going to be the inside of your blanket. We don't want the pins in there. Yeah. So we're going to just gently turn it over and pin from the back.
Don't have to put a
Yeah,
lot.
just a few. I mean, this is a small blanket, so we're just putting a few just to hold it down so it doesn't shift while we're sewing it.
Right.
Okay, that's really good. Now, this is our back, so what we're going to do is we're going to put it down. Put your right side up. We're going to put the right side down to the right side of our back material.
Almost always sew right sides together. Exactly.
Most of your projects, you're going to sew right sides of the material together. So that's what we have here. Our right sides are together. Our pellon, our batting is on top. And we're going to pin this again. Now this time we can pin from the top.
And you want to pin away from the edge because we're going to be sewing around the edge for our seam.
Okay, I think that's pretty good.
Wonderful.
And then you're going to sew this very similar to the pillow because, you know, we're going to turn right sides out. So let's get the one that we made. I think we laid this one out a little different. We laid this one out with the pellon on the on the flannel, but it's still the same. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
And see, you can see here, we started here and ended here, so we left a nice hole. So let's turn this one out.
Okay, so I'm going to turn this one, and I've got my batting holding on to that one.
Right, it's still pinned.
Still pinned.
The batting is still pinned, but the pins are going to be on the right side of this fabric so that we can remove them.
And I want to do this as
little
gently
later.
as I can. And I'm turning it inside out, just like I did the
pillow.
little doll pillow.
Oh, that's so cute.
This is going to be darling.
You can tell already. Some of you may want to like baste. What you call baste is just putting a little stitch. It's like going to tack this batting to your material instead of pinning it, so you won't have to worry about getting pins like if children are going to do this. You might just want to baste it with a needle and thread. Just one little stitch would work, and I would just tack it in. It's just a little temporary thing so that you don't have to stick yourself
And
with
you
pins.
can go back up very carefully because you're going to
Yeah, you have your pins in there. And just like in the pillow, you're going to
make these little
point your
corners.
corners. What you want to do now is, of course, you want to whip stitch your hole closed, just like
we did on
the pillow. And we're ready. We're going to tie this quilt, and we're going to ask Cecilia to come and help us tie it.
Why are we tying the quilt?
We're going to tie the quilt because it is going to hold everything together. The tie is going to go through all 3 pieces of fabric. That way nothing is going to shift. See how loose this is? And it would get all tangled up. Exactly, it would be a ball in there if we didn't tie it. So, before we tie it, we need to pin it one more time so that when we tie it, it's all even. So we're going to take out the pins from the batting, and this time we're going to go all the way through all 3 layers. So we're going to take these out.
Do we want to leave the pins on this side so we can see them good?
It
It
really doesn't matter, but we're going to be tying it from the top, so we might as well put our pins from the top. And what I like to do is start in the middle, and you just want to spread it out all nice.
So it won't be lumpy bumpy?
Right, you spread it out from the middle and just pin it a couple of times. This is kind of the same way we did the other thing. There we go. There we go.
One more over.
All right, CeCe, do you have 2 now?
Yep.
Great.
So,
the pins.
what you're going to do is usually when you're hand sewing a blanket, you usually come from the underneath through. But this time, since we're going to actually tie these strings in knots, we need to go from the top down. So we want to start from the middle to sew out so we don't get any puckers, because if you start from the sides, you might end up, doing like that. You don't want that in your blanket. So here we go. Go down. And pull it.
But you want
and I didn't knot my end here because I'm just going to leave it out like that. Then I'm going to come right back up,
Right
next to it, right there. See? Come up, pull it through like that. Then I'm going to just move over to my next square, and I'm going to sew right back down. And what it's going to make here is one big huge stitch. What we're going to do is we're going to keep making these all on this blanket, and when we're done we're going to cut then we're going to in between, and then we're going to tie them like this.
And this is an old, real old quilting method.
Yes, it is.
So
It's
this
kind
is
of like
a type
quilting
of
shortcut here.
Right, quilting shortcut.
Yeah,
Now skip over to right here.
It's really cute.
If one of y'all want to thread another needle and
You want to do it, Jack?
Sure.
Go ahead.
And you only have to do this maybe every 3 or 4 inches.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
It is. I remember the first time I learned this, a friend showed us at her house. She was making a big blanket for like a picnic blanket, and she was doing this. And I went home right away that day, I think, and I made a baby quilt. And I tied it, and I was very young. I was still learning how to sew. So it's very easy to do and fun.
As a matter of fact, we could
Start probably clipping.
Right.
The idea, here's where I put my needle in, and here's my stitch.
Big stitch.
I'll come right into the
right there.
middle, and you can clip the next one. I'm going to tie this. Of course, I'm going to make it look nice, too. I don't want to tie it too tight. I'll tie it in a double knot, like that. About like that, CeCe?
Yeah, you don't have to trim them up unless you have really long tails that you don't want.
I want them the
Hanging
same,
out
don't
there.
I? We want them the same, don't we?
Yeah.
Okay.
There.
There you go. Isn't that cute?
If you wanted to, you could probably mark on your quilts, do little X's or something in a fabric pen or marker to where you want each tie to be. But we just eyed it, as you can see. Let's see, y'all did pretty good though. I think those
Yeah,
are
and
spaced
you don't want to pull
evenly.
these too tight, right? Found this little doll and I've been so happy, and found her a little nightgown, and now she's got a pillow. She's got 2 pillows and a blanket. Got her pillow and her pillowcase, and now we've got her little quilt. And that is so sweet. And it just fits her perfect. Isn't that sweet?
We're gonna make a tiered skirt using the same principles that we used earlier. The first thing you need to do is decide what measurement you want to make your skirt. Now we're going to give you some measurements, but we're going to also show you a way that you can measure yourself or somebody else that you're going to be sewing for. So you can get out your tape measure and measure 42 if you're small. You just want to make sure that you can step into this and bring it up to your waist. If you can't, you need to add a few more inches. Is that about right, CeCe?
Yep.
Okay. So that will give you your measurements for your top tier, because you're
For
going to
the width of it.
the width. Now, we'll give you the measurements for the length, but you also might want to measure from wherever you like to wear your waist down to wherever you want your skirt to stop. And remember to add seam allowance for the casing. We're going to make a casing. It's very similar to the hem that we did on the pillowcase. So you want to add probably 1.5 inches, and then you want to add a little bit on the bottom for your hem.
Our top tier is going to be 42 inches wide and 11 inches long. 11 inches down this way for our first one.
Our middle tier is 61 inches wide, and then it's 17 inches long. And again, you just like we did in the pillowcase, you can cut these on the fold.
Right.
So you do the math, and the bottom tier, this is a 3-tiered skirt, is going to be 87 inches wide and 13.5 inches long. And that'll give you a small lady's skirt.
We're going to put right sides together. You're going to have a fold over here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew a seam right there.
Just like with all the other seams. And
Right.
we should
Yes,
probably
we
go ahead
should
and pin this so it doesn't slide around and stuff. So, and you want to pin it on into your skirt because you're going to sew on the edge, and we don't want to have to be removing these as we're sewing. So we're just going to pin a few inches into the skirt. We're doing the side seam. This is the seam that runs
so we'll be going
down. So we're going to do this on all 3 tiers. This is the middle tier that we're doing.
For my guideline on a seam allowance, I actually put my presser foot down and I keep it right even with the edge of the material. And that actually puts your stitching about right here, right in here. And that way it's easy to, you know, not go crooked and stuff and sew a straight seam. Start a little bit. Go backwards. I always like to stop when I'm sewing a seam and make sure and check, even though I have it pinned, make sure you got your under piece and your top piece together nice and neat so you don't make any mistakes. Do my back stitch. Now that's your seam for your first tier. The gather stitch is, it's a longer stitch, it's not a small tiny stitch like you usually use when you're making a seam. The gather stitch is a longer stitch that you sew one side of the material all the way around. So you're not putting two pieces together because they're already put together.
Yeah, it's just a single piece of fabric.
You sew all the way around here, and you do about the same kind of seam allowance as you would on the seam. And you leave a long thread at the end because you're going to take one of those threads and you're going to gather up, pull the thread, and it's going to bunch up the fabric like this. And what that does is it makes this measurement up here, you can size it down and make it smaller to fit your top tier. Because this is not quite as wide as your next tier. That's why they call it a tiered skirt, because it just gets wider and wider.
Okay.
So let's do a gather stitch.
We're going to do the gather stitch in the top of the middle piece and the top of the bottom piece. So we've already done this one, and now Cecilia would demonstrate on the sewing machine. And again, we like to start where your seam is.
And you can keep up with where you started.
Yeah, you can keep up with where you started. If
you
all
go
yours,
from seam to seam.
Yeah. We're just going to put it on the longest length stitch.
Now, on a gather stitch, you don't want to do a back stitch there because you want to be able to pull that thread there. So you just keep on going here.
You want to find, here's where I did my gather stitch, and you want to find, usually we sewed this from the top, so usually you want to pull the bobbin thread. So that's the thread we're going to pull to make our gathers. We're only going to pull one thread, and we're just going to move along. See there, it's starting to gather already. I'm just going to move. And you have to be patient doing this because if you pull too hard, you will break your thread and have to start all over again.
I've done that so many times.
So,
like, oh, I don't want to start over again.
So we're going to continue gathering this. And what we're doing is we're going to gather this up to fit. See, I'm gathering the bottom tier up to fit Cecilia's middle tier, and she's gathering it up
to fit
the top tier.
As I gather, I take my tier here and I kind of measure and eye it and see how much more I'm going to need to gather before it's the exact same size as this last. This lines up. What I'm doing is I gathered it up a little bit too much, which is no problem because you'd rather have it gathered up more than too less. All I do is you just kind of push them back out there and it kind of ungathers them there. There we go. I think that's going to work. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin this to right here.
I just usually go ahead and, this is our top tier. It's the narrowest tier. We have this turned right sides together and this turned wrong sides together. And so we're just going to put it in there. So that now we have it like this. See?
There.
So that right sides are together.
Yep. Now, what I like to do when I'm making a tiered skirt, it just kind of helps me keep up with where I'm at. Because sometimes, like if you make a really wide one, you can kind of get lost in all those gather stitches and everything. But what I like to do is I like to line up my two seams here. The seam of the first tier and the seam of the second tier. And that's also going to be my starting point for my pinning them on. I'm just going to pin it here like that. And then I'm going to go like this, find out where the other side is. Start pinning it together. I have done it before when I haven't pinned them on, but sometimes that's not a very good idea because then you might have too much fabric or not enough fabric, and it'd be better to go ahead and pin it and make sure you know what you need before you get over to the sewing machine and have to seam rip something out. I'm just putting my pins every 3 or 4 inches. You don't have to put them real close.
Okay, I think you're almost done here.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a good reason to pin it. See here? We've got a little more skirt than we do our top tier, so we need to gather it. We know right where our gather string is because it's the longest we've been pulling it out. So we're just going to pull on it to take it up so that it matches that top tier evenly. So we won't have any puckers.
Right. Okay, let's see.
Okay, so there's your last pin. Let's pin one more right here.
All right.
And you're going to be sewing this on the gathered side. So you're going to be putting this side up on the sewing machine. So that's why we pinned it from this side, so we can either take out the pins as we go if we need to. All right, I think that fits great, CeCE. You did a good job.
Now it's time for us to sew on our skirt. Like Jasmine said before, we're going to go right below where the gather stitch is. I'm going to keep my presser foot right on the edge there. You always want to be very careful when you're putting your gathered skirt on your tier onto your other tier, because